Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive.
Glad to be here.
Today we're going to be talking all about Essentialism, the disciplined pursuit of less by Greg McKeown.
Yeah, one of my favorites.
This one has been super popular with all of you, so we thought we'd spend some time really digging into it and figuring out how to apply these concepts to our work lives as business professionals.
Absolutely.
So McKeown starts off with a great example from the design world, actually.
Yeah.
Dieter Rams, this legendary designer at Braun.
Yeah, the less but better guy.
Exactly. And, he's the one behind that iconic Braun record player.
The one with the clear plastic lid, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's so interesting to think about it now. Back then, record players were these big, clunky pieces of furniture.
Just hidden away, under these heavy lids and all.
Totally. And Rams just came in and said, nope, we don't need all of that.
Strip it down to the essentials.
Yep. And it was a revolution.
Totally changed the game.
And so it really makes you think, right? What are we hiding under the metaphorical lid in our businesses?
Ooh, that's a good one.
Could our products be simpler? Could our marketing messages be clearer?
Definitely.
What can we strip away to make things better?
Even meetings, how many meetings could we just get rid of?
Totally. Meetings are always a good place to start.
Right.
So, we're talking about decluttering, getting rid of the non-essential. But then McKeown brings up this idea of the paradox of success.
Yeah.
Have you ever experienced this?
Oh, big time.
He tells this story, which is kind of funny, but also kind of stressful.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Where he's in a client meeting while his wife is in labor.
Oh my God.
Yeah, and it's this perfect example of how success can kind of pull us in all these directions.
Yeah, you start out, you're focused, you have this clear vision, and then
you succeed.
Right. And then suddenly everyone wants a piece of you.
And you're just yes to everything.
Yeah. And you end up spread so thin.
And not doing anything particularly well.
Right. You become less effective even though you're more successful.
Exactly. It's a total paradox.
So he breaks this down into 4 phases.
Okay, I'm listening.
So you start with phase 1, right? You have clarity. You're making good choices. And that leads to success.
Okay, makes sense.
But then that success leads to phase 2, where you get all these new opportunities and distractions.
And that's when things start to get a little messy.
Yeah, and then you hit phase 3.
Uh-oh.
This is where the success becomes a burden.
Because you're just doing too much.
You're overwhelmed, you're not focused, and you're not doing your best work.
And eventually, that leads to phase 4.
The burnout phase.
Yeah, where you're just going through the motions.
You've lost sight of what really matters.
And it's a wake-up call,
Are you really making the most of your time and energy?
Are you actually contributing at the highest level?
It's a tough question to ask yourself.
McKeown uses his own story of dropping out of law school to illustrate this point.
Oh, yeah, that's a powerful one.
He was on this path to success, right?
The classic pair.
But it wasn't really his choice.
He was following someone else's script.
Yeah, and he realized he had to make a change.
To choose his own path.
And it really makes you think, right? How often do we say, I have to, instead of I choose to?
It's so easy to fall into that trap.
Especially in the business world. There's so much pressure to just keep saying yes.
And to everything.
Exactly. So it's we have to be really intentional about what we say yes to.
And even more intentional about what we say no to.
Which brings us to another key concept from the book.
Trade-offs.
Yeah. He uses the airline industry to explain this.
Southwest Airlines.
Yeah. They were all about being the no-frills, low-cost option.
No meals, no assigned seating, just point-to-point flights.
And they made it work.
They were incredibly successful.
And then you have Continental Airlines who tried to copy them with their Continental Light service.
Yeah, that didn't go so well.
Not at all. It backfired spectacularly.
Because they were trying to be everything to everyone.
They wanted to cater to both budget-conscious and full-service travelers.
And they ended up pleasing no one.
They were straddling 2 strategies instead of making a clear choice.
And it cost them.
So this is the question for all of you listening.
Where are you straddling in your own work?
Are you trying to do too many things at once?
Are you spreading yourself too thin?
Because sometimes saying no to good opportunities
is the only way to say yes to the great ones.
And that leads us to another important point.
Creating space.
Yeah, McKeown talks about the importance of making time to think, to read, to explore.
Bill Gates does this with his Think Week.
Yeah, he isolates himself for a whole week every year just to read and reflect.
No distractions, just pure thinking time.
And McKeown himself makes it a point to read classic literature every morning.
They both understand that creating that mental space isn't a luxury.
It's a necessity.
It's essential for doing your best work.
It's so easy to get caught up in the day-to-day whirlwind of meetings and emails and deadlines.
But if you don't make time to think,
to step back and see the bigger picture,
you're going to get lost in the weeds.
you're going to burn out.
So even if it's just a few minutes each day,
Find a way to create that space, to clear your mind,
to reconnect with your priorities.
to ask yourself the big questions.
What are you working towards?
What really matters?
And how can you make the biggest impact?
Because that's what essentialism is all about.
It's about identifying what's truly essential,
And eliminating everything else.
so you can focus your time and energy on what matters most.
On what will make the biggest difference.
In your work?
And in your life.
And that's how you achieve true success.
That's how you become an essentialist.
Less but better. Couldn't have said it better myself.
Okay, so we've talked about creating space, but how do we actually decide what fills that space? How do we know what's truly essential? McKeown talks about this tool called the 90% rule.
A 90% rule. Yeah, it's all about setting a really high bar for the opportunities we pursue.
Okay, I like that.
So when you're evaluating something, a new project or even just a task on your to-do list, you ask yourself on a scale of 1 to 10, how excited am I about this? If it's anything less than a 9, it's a no.
Wow, that's hardcore.
It is. It's about eliminating anything that doesn't truly energize you.
So you can focus on the things that really matter.
Exactly. The things that are most likely to make a real impact.
So it's not just about saying no.
Right.
It's also about being open to new possibilities.
Absolutely. And one of the best ways to discover those possibilities is to pay attention to what frustrates you in your work.
What do you mean?
What are the pain points? What processes are clunky? What are your customers complaining about?
Oh, I see. So those frustrations can actually be valuable clues.
Exactly. It's about approaching those frustrations with a sense of curiosity, like a journalist investigating a story,
Oh, yeah. McKeown talks about this. He calls it journalistic thinking.
Right. Don't just accept things at face value.
Ask why.
Dig deeper. Look for the underlying patterns.
He uses the journalist Nora Ephron as an example.
Oh, yeah.
Her high school journalism teacher told her, it's not enough to just report the facts. You have to figure out what they mean, why they matter.
And that's such a valuable skill for anyone in business,
Totally. It's about connecting the dots, seeing the bigger picture.
Which reminds me of that story McKeown tells about Eastern Airlines Flight 401.
Oh, gosh. Yeah, the one that crashed because the crew got so focused on a minor issue with the landing gear.
They lost sight of the bigger picture, literally the altitude of the plane.
And it had tragic consequences.
It's a reminder that even in business, getting lost in the weeds can be disastrous.
So how do we as busy professionals cultivate that big picture thinking?
I think it starts with creating opportunities to step back and reflect.
Like scheduling regular strategy sessions.
Exactly. Even if it's just 30 minutes a week.
Just to zoom out.
Look at the big picture.
And don't underestimate the power of journaling.
Even just a few minutes each day to reflect on your work,
It can help you identify patterns, spot potential problems.
Make adjustments before things escalate.
And it can also help you prioritize right.
Absolutely. Figure out what's truly essential and what can be delegated or even eliminated.
Speaking of prioritizing, one of the most essential activities is often overlooked.
Sleep.
Ugh, I know it's so true.
We wear our lack of sleep as a badge of honor,
It's proof of our dedication.
But McKeown argues that sleep deprivation is actually sabotage.
He tells that story about Jeff, the CEO, who pushed himself to the limit.
Working crazy hours, traveling constantly.
Barely sleeping.
And his health completely collapsed.
Yeah, it's a reminder that we can't pour from an empty cup.
We have to take care of ourselves if we want to be at our best.
And McKeown actually cites research showing that sleep deprivation negatively impacts cognitive function, decision-making, even creativity.
Like trying to run a business on fumes.
Totally. And he shares this study about violinists.
The best performers were getting a full hour more sleep than the average American.
And they were taking longer naps, too.
Resting is just as important as working if you want to be at the top of your game.
So what does he suggest? How much sleep should we be aiming for?
At least 7 to 8 hours of quality sleep each night.
Okay. And how do we actually make that happen, with our busy schedules?
It's about creating a relaxing bedtime routine.
Like avoiding screens before bed.
Exactly. And recognizing that sleep is an investment in our productivity, not a luxury.
I'm convinced sleep is essential.
Good. Now, beyond sleep, we need to think about how we choose to spend our waking hours.
Remember, essentialism isn't about doing less. It's about being incredibly selective with what we do choose to do.
He uses the example of the furniture company Vitso,
Oh, yeah, the ones who make that super cool shelving system.
the 606 universal shelving system.
Yeah. And they've been so successful by focusing on just that one product.
Less, but better in action.
And it's not just their product line, right?
Nope. They're equally selective about who they hire.
They'd rather be understaffed than hire the wrong person.
They understand that the people you work with have a huge impact on your ability to achieve your essential goals.
This is a great point for leaders you know.
Like, are you building a team of essentialists?
People who are truly aligned with your core values and goals.
Or are you just filling positions?
Another key aspect of making those choices is having a clear, essential intent.
McKeown uses Brad Pitt's Make It Right organization as an example.
Oh, yeah, the one that built homes for families in New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina.
Exactly. Their essential intent was incredibly specific to build 150 affordable, green, storm-resistant homes.
That's so much more powerful than just saying, we want to help people.
Having that concrete goal gave them a clear roadmap for their efforts.
And it made it easier for them to say no to anything that didn't align with that essential intent.
So McKeown suggests asking ourselves, how will we know when we're done?
It's about defining success in clear, measurable terms.
So we've identified what's essential. We've eliminated the non-essential. Now what?
Now we execute.
But even execution should be approached from an essentialist perspective,
All right, so we're back, and we've talked about a lot, decluttering, prioritizing sleep, all through this lens of essentialism.
Right.
But there's this other piece that McKeown brings up that I think is really interesting.
The B phase, right.
Yeah, just being present in our work.
It sounds so simple.
Almost too simple.
But in a world that's obsessed with busyness, just being can feel radical.
Totally. Like we're so used to constantly doing.
But McKeown argues that it's in those moments of stillness, of just being, that we often find clarity and inspiration.
It's like he makes this analogy about a cluttered room.
Oh, yeah.
When our minds are full of all these to-do lists and distractions, it's impossible to focus.
You can't think straight.
But when we declutter, create that mental space.
That's when creativity can emerge.
So how do we actually do that? Like, how do we achieve that state of just being?
Well, McKeown offers a few tips. One that I find really helpful is just asking yourself, what's important now?
It seems so basic.
But it's powerful. It brings your attention to the present moment.
He tells this story about feeling totally overwhelmed after a long day of teaching.
Oh.
And he was just bombarded with all these reminders of things he could be doing.
And it was sending him into a spiral.
So he stopped, knelt down, closed his eyes, and asked himself, what's important now?
And the answer was figuring out what was important.
Right. It's like a meta moment.
It's a perfect example of how a pause, a moment of reconnection with the present, can completely shift our perspective.
Another technique he mentions is getting the future out of our heads. It's not about ignoring our future goals, but recognizing that they're not the priority right now.
Yeah, it's like mentally filing them away so they're not taking up space in our minds.
So we can focus on what's in front of us.
Exactly. And McKeown also talks about the importance of focusing on what we're doing fully and completely.
He uses the example of Jiro Ono, the sushi chef.
The master.
Yeah. Jiro is totally present in every single step of his work.
From selecting the fish to crafting each piece of sushi.
It's a beautiful illustration of mastery, of being fully engaged in the moment.
And it's a reminder that we don't have to be world-class sushi chefs to achieve that level of focus.
Right. It's available to all of us in any task.
And McKeown also emphasizes finding joy in the process, not just the outcome.
He talks about Thich Nhat Hanh, the Buddhist monk,
who teaches that true happiness comes from being present in every moment, even the mundane ones.
Finding joy in the doing.
And that brings us to the ultimate goal of essentialism.
Living a life of meaning.
McKeown uses Mahatma Gandhi as an example.
Gandhi. Now that's an essentialist.
He stripped away everything that wasn't essential, both materially and spiritually.
And he focused his life on a cause that he deeply believed in.
And his impact on the world was immeasurable.
It's a powerful reminder of what's possible when we focus our energy on what truly matters.
And you don't have to be Gandhi to live a life of meaning.
We can all apply these principles in our own ways.
Find our own unique path to making a difference.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into essentialism, I want to leave you with a challenge.
Oh, I like this.
If you could only focus on one thing in your work right now, what would it be? And why?
It's a tough question, but it really forces you to get clear on your priorities.
To strip away the distraction.
And to reconnect with your core purpose.
To rediscover the essence of your work.
The heart of why you do what you do.
And remember, the journey to essentialism is ongoing.
It's about making conscious choices day after day.
To prioritize what truly matters.
To live and work with intention, meaning, and impact.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you found it valuable, and we'll see you next time.